The throne room was silent, except for the soft hum of ancient machines hidden behind the walls. Princess Yuna stood at the center of it all, her heart beating so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. Today was the day she had dreaded and prepared for her entire life. Today, she would become queen. Her mother had passed away 3 months ago. The illness had taken her slowly, giving Yuna time to say goodbye, but also time to watch her suffer. Now, standing in the same spot where her mother had stood for 40 years, Yuna felt the weight of an empire pressing down on her shoulders. The High Priest of the Valorian faith approached her with the crown of stars held carefully in his 4 hands. The crown was beautiful and terrible at the same time. It was made from metals that came from a dying star, shaped by craftsmen who had lived thousands of years ago. Blue light pulsed through it like a heartbeat. "Do you accept the burden of your people?" The High Priest asked, his voice echoing through the massive chamber. "I accept," Yuna answered. Her voice did not shake. She had practiced this moment 100 times in front of her mirror. The crown touched her head, and she felt a strange warmth spread through her body. It was done. She was no longer a princess. She was Queen Yuna of the Valorian Empire, ruler of 17 star systems and protector of 4 billion souls. The gathered dignitaries erupted in polite applause. Ambassadors from dozens of species had come to witness this moment. Tall insectoid Krellians stood next to the short, furry Mandari. Crystalline Ethosi flickered with inner light beside the gray-skinned Tovani. And in the back, almost hidden in the shadows, stood a small group of humans. They were the newest members of the galactic community, and most species still did not know what to make of them. Yuna spent the next several hours accepting congratulations and making small talk with important people. It was exhausting. Her face hurt from smiling. Her feet ached from standing. But she was a queen now, and queens did not complain about such things. It was late in the evening when she finally escaped to her private chambers. She removed the crown of stars and placed it carefully on its stand. Then she sat by her window and looked out at the stars. Her mother had told her many things before she died. She had shared secrets about running an empire, about dealing with difficult allies, about making hard choices. But there was one thing her mother had refused to discuss, no matter how many times Yuna asked. The HFY War. It had happened 15 years ago, when Yuna was just a child. She remembered the fear in her mother's eyes during those terrible months. She remembered being rushed to underground bunkers when the alarm sounded. She remembered the day her mother came home and announced that the war was over, that they had won. But her mother never wanted to talk about how they won. Yuna had learned the official story in her history classes. General Taurus, the greatest military commander of his generation, had led a brilliant surprise attack against the HFY command fleet. He had destroyed their queen's flagship and broken their will to fight. The war ended, and General Taurus became a legend. But something about that story had always bothered Yuna. She had met General Taurus many times at official functions. He was old now, retired and living on a comfortable estate. And every time someone mentioned the Battle of Crimson Nebula, she noticed something strange in his eyes. It was not pride. It was not satisfaction. It looked almost like guilt. During the coronation ceremony, Yuna had spoken with several veteran soldiers who had served during the war. When she asked them about the final battle, they all reacted the same way. Their smiles faded. They looked away. They changed the subject as quickly as possible. Why would heroes be ashamed of their greatest victory? Yuna could not let this question go. Late that night, she accessed the Imperial archives using her new authority as queen. Her mother had kept her out of these files, but now nothing was forbidden to her. She began reading through war reports from 15 years ago. Most of it was exactly what she expected. Casualty lists, supply records, strategic assessments. But then she found something strange. There were gaps in the timeline. Reports that ended mid-sentence. Files that were marked as classified with no explanation. And references to something called Protocol Sunfire that appeared in dozens of documents, but was never actually explained. Yuna dug deeper. She found a communication log from the day before the final battle. It mentioned a transmission that had been received from deep inside Cathari space. The transmission had provided coordinates for the enemy flagship. Without those coordinates, the surprise attack would have been impossible. But who had sent that transmission? The log did not say. The sender was listed only as Asset 7. Yuna searched for any other reference to Asset 7. She found nothing. It was as if someone had carefully erased this person from history. The next morning, Minister Seong-ho came to brief her on the day's schedule. He was an old friend of her mother, a trusted advisor who had served the crown for 30 years. Yuna decided to test him. "I was reading about the Cathari War last night," she said casually. "I found some interesting gaps in the records." Seong-ho's face remained calm, but Yuna saw his hands tighten slightly on his datapad. "The war was a difficult time, Your Majesty," he said. "Many records were lost in the chaos." Lost? Yuna pressed. Or hidden? Seong-ho was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more serious. "Your mother buried certain truths for good reasons. I would advise you to leave them buried." "What truths?" "Some things are better left in the past, Your Majesty. The Empire is at peace. Your people are happy. Why disturb that peace with old secrets?" Yuna looked at him steadily. "Because I am queen now, and a queen should not rule an empire built on lies." Seong-ho sighed. He suddenly looked very old and very tired. "Then I hope you are ready for what you might find," he said. "Because some truths once learned cannot be unlearned." He left without another word. Yuna sat alone in her chambers, thinking about what he had said. She knew she should probably take his advice. She had an empire to run, problems to solve, allies to manage. She did not have time to chase ghosts from a war that ended before she was old enough to understand it. But she could not stop thinking about Asset 7. Someone had risked everything to send that transmission. Someone had made victory possible. And that someone had been erased from history. Queen Yuna made a decision. She would find out who Asset 7 was. She would learn the true story of how the war was won. And if someone had been denied the honor they deserved, she would make it right. No matter what it cost her. Queen Yuna spent the next several days pretending everything was normal. She attended meetings. She signed documents. She smiled at ambassadors and listened to their boring speeches. But every night, when the palace grew quiet, she returned to the archives. She had discovered something that most people did not know. The Imperial Archives had layers. The surface level contained official records that any government worker could access. But beneath that were older files, classified files, files that required special clearance to even know they existed. As queen, Yuna had the highest clearance possible. She could access everything. What she found in those deep archives changed everything she thought she knew about the war. The Cathari War had not been a close victory. It had been a disaster that somehow turned into a miracle. The official story said the Valorian fleet had fought bravely against a dangerous enemy, and eventually won through superior tactics and courage. The truth was much darker. The Valorians had been losing badly. The Cathari were an ancient warrior species that had been conquering worlds for thousands of years. They did not fight for territory or resources. They fought because they believed it was their sacred duty to dominate all other life forms in the galaxy. Within the first 3 months of the war, the Cathari had destroyed half of the Valorian fleet. They had captured 3 core worlds. Millions of Valorians had been taken prisoner or killed. The Empire was falling apart. Una found a secret communication between her mother and the Imperial Council from that time. Her mother had been considering surrender. The alternative was the complete destruction of their species. But then something happened. Something that the records called Protocol Sunfire. Una spent hours trying to find details about Protocol Sunfire. Most of the relevant files had been deleted or corrupted, but she managed to piece together fragments of the story. During the darkest days of the war, a group of humans had volunteered to join the fight. Humans were a young species, barely known in the galaxy. They had no advanced technology. Their military was small and poorly equipped. Most Valorians had never even seen a human in person. The Imperial Council had debated whether to accept their offer. Some argued that humans were too primitive to be useful. Others worried that allowing them to fight would make the Empire look weak. But the Valorians were desperate. They needed every ship, every soldier, every advantage they could find, so they accepted the human volunteers. A group of about 200 humans were formed into a special reconnaissance unit. They were given old ships that nobody else wanted. They were sent on missions that were considered too dangerous or too unimportant for Valorian soldiers. Nobody expected them to survive, but the humans did more than survive. They fought with a ferocity that shocked their Valorian commanders. They took risks that seemed insane. They refused to retreat, even when retreat was the only logical option. And they kept winning battles they should have lost. Una found reports from Valorian officers who had worked with the human unit. The language in these reports was fascinating. Words like unpredictable appeared often. So did phrases like unusual determination and strange emotional attachment. To mission objectives. One report described a human pilot who had flown his damaged ship directly into a Cathari cruiser to protect a Valorian medical transport. The pilot had known he would die. He did it anyway, because there were wounded soldiers on that transport who would have been killed otherwise. The Valorians did not understand this. In their culture, a soldier who threw away their life for strangers was considered foolish, not brave. But the humans did not seem to care what the Valorians thought. As Una read more, she began to understand why her mother had buried these records. The humans had not just helped win the war. They had won it almost entirely by themselves. The key had been one human soldier. The records called him Asset 7, but Una found an older document that used his real designation, Scout Pilot 7, Human Volunteer Unit. This soldier had been assigned to a simple reconnaissance mission. He was supposed to observe Cathari troop movements near the border and report back. It should have been routine. Instead, he had gone deeper into enemy space than any Valorian ship had ever gone before. He had somehow avoided detection for days. He had located the Cathari Queen's flagship, the heart of their entire war effort, and he had transmitted its coordinates back to Valorian command. The transmission had been brief. Just a string of numbers and a single phrase in broken Valorian. Coordinates confirmed. Send everything. I will keep them busy. That was the last anyone heard from him. General Taurus had received those coordinates and immediately launched the attack that won the war. The Cathari Queen was killed. Her flagship was destroyed. Without her to lead them, the Cathari fell into chaos and eventually retreated back to their own territory. The war was over. The Valorians had won, but the Council had faced a problem. How could they explain to their people that their salvation had come from a species they considered inferior? How could they admit that their greatest victory was really a human victory? They could not. So they decided to lie. General Taurus was given credit for discovering the flagship's location. The human volunteer unit was quietly disbanded. Their records were classified or destroyed, and the galaxy was told that the mighty Valorian Empire had saved itself to its own strength and wisdom. Yuna sat back in her chair, her mind spinning. Everything she had been taught about the war was a lie. The hero everyone celebrated had simply followed coordinates given to him by a human pilot, who was never supposed to be anything more than disposable. And that human pilot, the one who had really won the war, had been erased from history. Nobody even knew his name, but Yuna was not going to accept that. She was queen now. She had resources and power that her mother never would have given her. And she was going to find out what happened to Asset 7. She called for Commander G1, the most trusted agent in the Imperial Security Service. G1 had served Yuna's family for 20 years and had never failed a mission. When G1 arrived, Yuna handed her a datapad containing everything she had found. "I need you to find this person," Yuna said. "The human who sent those coordinates. I need to know if he survived. And if he did, I need to know where he is now." G1 looked at the datapad, then back at the Queen. "This is classified information, Your Majesty." "Very classified. I know. That is why I am trusting you with it." G1 nodded slowly. "If this human is still alive, I will find him. But may I ask why this matters so much to you?" Yuna thought about the question for a moment before answering. "Because someone saved my people," she said. "Someone gave everything they had so that we could survive. And instead of honoring them, we erased them. That is not justice. That is not right. And as long as I am queen, I will not let it stand." G1 bowed her head. "I understand, Your Majesty. I will begin immediately." She left the palace that same night, heading for the frontier worlds where the human refugees had settled after the war. Yuna watched her ship disappear into the stars and wondered what secrets were waiting to be discovered. Commander G1's ship dropped out of hyperspace above a small gray world called Hestara. It was not a beautiful planet. The sky was always cloudy. The land was rocky and harsh. But it was home to one of the largest human settlements outside of Earth. After the war, many humans had chosen to stay in this part of the galaxy rather than return home. Some had married aliens. Some had found work they enjoyed. And some, G1 suspected, had been encouraged to stay away by governments that did not want them talking about what they had seen. She landed her ship at a small spaceport on the edge of the main settlement. A human customs officer checked her documents and raised an eyebrow when he saw she was Valorian. "We don't get many of your kind here," he said. "What brings you to Hestara?" "Research," G1 replied. "I am looking for information about humans who served in the HFY War." The customs officer's expression changed. It became harder, more suspicious. "That was a long time ago. Most of those folks don't like talking about it." "I understand. I am not here to cause trouble." "I am not here to cause trouble. I simply want to learn." The officer studied her for a long moment, then stamped her documents and waved her through. "Good luck," he said. "You'll need it." G1 spent her first day in the settlement just watching and listening. Humans were fascinating creatures. They were physically weaker than most species. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. And yet they had survived and spread across dozens of worlds in just a few generations. She noticed something interesting about the way humans interacted with each other. They touched a lot. A hand on the shoulder. A hug between friends. A parent carrying a child. Physical contact seemed important to them in a way that Valorians did not understand. On her second day, G1 began asking questions. She visited a local bar where older humans gathered to drink and tell stories. She bought them drinks and listened to their tales. Most of them were farmers or traders now, living quiet lives far from the wars of their youth. When she mentioned the HFY War, the mood in the bar changed. Smiles faded. Eyes grew distant. One old man finished his drink in a single gulp and walked out without saying a word. But a woman named Grandmother Su Yan agreed to speak with her. She was nearly 80 years old, her hair completely white, her face marked by decades of hard living. But her eyes were sharp and clear. "I was a medic in the volunteer unit," Su Yan said. "Patched up more broken bodies than I can count. Watched a lot of good people die." "I am sorry," Ji-won said. "That must have been difficult." Su Yan shrugged. "War is difficult. That's the whole point of it, isn't it? To make things so difficult that everyone eventually decides to stop." Ji-won asked her about the human who had sent the coordinates for the final attack. Su Yan was quiet for a long time before answering. "You mean Min-jun," she said finally. "Park Min-jun. He was just a kid when he joined us. 22, maybe 23. Farm boy from a colony on the edge of nowhere. What was he like?" Su Yan smiled, but it was a sad smile. Quiet. Serious, not the type to make jokes or show off. But there was something about him. When things got bad, really bad, he was always the calmest person in the room. Like he had already accepted whatever was going to happen and just wanted to do his job before it did. She told Ji-won about the day the volunteer unit received its final mission. The Valorian command had asked for volunteers to scout deep into Cathari space. Everyone knew it was a death sentence. The Cathari had sensors everywhere. No ship had ever made it more than a few light years past the border. 3 pilots volunteered. 2 of them were killed within the first day. Only Min-jun made it through. He flew for 9 days straight, Su Yan said. 9 days without sleep, without backup, without anyone to talk to. Just him and his little ship, dodging patrols and hiding in asteroid fields. "How do you know this?" Ji-won asked. "Because he recorded everything. Short messages, maybe 30 seconds each, sent on frequencies the Cathari couldn't detect. We received them days after he sent them. Oh, we received them. It was like listening to a ghost." Su Yan's voice grew thick with emotion. "The last message we got was from the Cathari homeworld. He had actually made it to their homeworld. He said he could see the Queen's flagship from his position. He said he was going to get closer to confirm the coordinates. And then? And then nothing. His signal went dead. We assumed he had been killed." Ji-won leaned forward. "But you said his name is Park Min-jun. You used present tense. Is he still alive?" Su Yan hesitated. She looked around the bar as if checking for listeners, then leaned in close. "A few years ago, maybe 3 or 4, a supply ship came through here on its way to the outer colonies. The captain was an old friend of mine. She told me she had stopped at a little farming moon called Green Hollow to pick up grain. And she saw someone there who looked exactly like Min-jun. Did she speak to him? She tried, but he pretended not to recognize her. Walked away without saying a word." Ji-won felt her heart beating faster. "Do you think it was really him?" "The captain served with us during the war." She knew Min-chun's face as well as her own. She said there was no doubt in her mind. Ji-won stood up and placed a generous payment on the table. "Thank you, grandmother. You have been very helpful." Su Yan grabbed her arm before she could leave. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone so old. "If you find him," she said, "don't expect a warm welcome. Whatever happened to him out there changed him. The boy who flew into Cathari space never really came back. Something else did." Ji-won nodded and gently freed her arm. "I will remember that." She returned to her ship and immediately sent a coded message to Queen Yuna. The human soldier had a name now. Park Min-jun. And he might still be alive. The Queen's response came within the hour. It was brief and direct. "Find him. I am coming to meet him myself." Ji-won read the message twice to make sure she understood. The queen was going to leave the capital and travel to a remote farming moon to meet a human farmer. It was the kind of decision that would make her advisors very unhappy. But G1 had served the royal family long enough to know that when a queen made up her mind, there was no point in arguing. She plotted a course for Green Hollow and began the journey that would change galactic history. Green Hollow was exactly the kind of place where someone would go to disappear. It was a small moon orbiting a gas giant in a system that most star maps did not even bother to name. The entire population was less than 2,000. Most of them were farmers who grew grain that was shipped to larger worlds. Queen Yuna arrived wearing simple clothes, her face hidden beneath a hood. Commander G1 had argued against this trip for hours. It was dangerous, she said. It was inappropriate. The queen had responsibilities. But Yuna had made her decision, and she was not going to change her mind. The settlement was quiet and peaceful. Low buildings made of local stone lined a single main road. Children played in the dust while their parents worked in the fields. Nobody paid attention to the two strangers walking through their town. G1 asked a local shopkeeper about the human farms outside the settlement. The shopkeeper was happy to chat. Most of the humans here had been around for years, she said. Good neighbors. Hard workers. Kept to themselves mostly. There is one who lives alone out past the eastern hills, the shopkeeper added. Older fellow. Doesn't come into town much. Grows the best wheat on the whole moon, though. Yuna and G1 followed the road out of town and over the hills. The landscape was beautiful in a simple way. Golden fields stretched to the horizon under a pale blue sky. The gas giant hung in the distance like a painted backdrop, its swirling clouds casting strange shadows on the land. The farm was small but well maintained. A stone house sat at the center of the fields, smoke rising from its chimney. A few simple machines were parked nearby for harvesting. There were no decorations, no signs of luxury. Just a working farm owned by someone who clearly valued function over form. A man was working in the field closest to the house. He was using a hand tool to check the soil, bending down to examine roots and leaves. His movements were slow and careful, the movements of someone who had done this work for many years. Yuna stopped at the edge of the field and watched him. He was human, probably in his late 50s. His hair was gray and cut short. His skin was weathered from sun and wind. When he stood up straight, she could see that he walked with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. The man noticed them and stopped working. He stood very still, watching them the way a wild animal watches a potential threat. Then he put down his tool and walked toward them. "You are a long way from anywhere," he said. His voice was calm and quiet. "Can I help you?" Yuna lowered her hood. "I am looking for a man named Park Minjun, a man who served in the HFY War." Something flickered in the man's eyes. It was gone so fast that Yuna almost missed it. Pain, maybe. Or fear. Or both. "I am just a farmer," he said. "I think you have the wrong person." "I do not think so." Yuna took a step closer. "My name is Yuna. I am the Queen of the Valorian Empire, and I have traveled a very long way to find you." The man was silent for a long moment. His face showed no expression. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I thought someone might come eventually," he said. "I did not expect it to be a queen. Please, come inside. I will make tea." The inside of the house was as simple as the outside. A single room served as kitchen, living area, and bedroom. The furniture was handmade and sturdy. A small fire burned in a stone hearth. The only decoration was a single photograph on a shelf, showing a group of smiling children. Minjun prepared tea using dried leaves from a jar on his shelf. His movements were efficient, practiced. He did not seem nervous or impressed by Yuna's presence. He acted as if queens visited his farm every day, When the tea was ready, he poured 3 cups and sat down across from his guests. "So," he said, "what do you want to know?" Yuna held her cup but did not drink. "I want to know what really happened. I want to know how you found the Cathari flagship. I want to know why you were erased from history." "That is a lot of wanting. I am a queen. I can want a lot." Minjun almost smiled at that. Almost. "I flew into Cathari space because someone had to. Our fleet was being destroyed. Your people were going to surrender. If that happened, the Cathari would have killed everyone. Not just soldiers. Everyone. Women. Children. Old people. They did not take prisoners from species they considered inferior. How did you survive behind their lines for so long?" "I was lucky. And careful. And I had a very small ship that was easy to hide." He paused. "Also, I did not care if I died. That helps when you are doing something dangerous. Fear makes you hesitate." I had no fear left. Yuna thought about that. She had never experienced the kind of fear that could burn itself out completely. She hoped she never would. "What happened when you found the flagship?" Minchun's eyes grew distant. He was not looking at her anymore. He was looking at something from 15 years ago, something that still lived inside his memory. "I sent the coordinates. Then I flew toward the flagship and started shooting. My weapons could not actually hurt it. But I got their attention. Their fighters came after me instead of watching for your fleet." He touched his left leg absently. "They caught me eventually. Shot me down on a small moon. I spent 3 weeks hiding in caves until the war ended. A Valorian rescue team found me. They were surprised I was still alive. Why did you never tell anyone? Why did you let General Torres take credit?" Minjung looked at her steadily. "Because I did not do it for credit. I did it for the children." "The children?" "There was a refugee convoy trying to escape the war zone. 12 ships full of families from the outer colonies. The Cathari were hunting them. If your fleet did not win the war in time, those ships would have been destroyed." He pointed to the photograph on the shelf. "My sister was on one of those ships. She had her 3 children with her. My nieces and nephew. They were 7, 5, and 2 years old." Yuna looked at the photograph again. The smiling children. Now she understood. "They survived," she said. It was not a question. Yes, all 12 ships made it to safety. 3 days after the war ended, I received a message from my sister. She sent me this picture. He picked up the photograph and looked at it. "This is all the reward I ever needed. Knowing they were safe. Knowing I helped make that happen." Yuna felt something tighten in her chest. She had expected many things from this meeting. She had expected a bitter old soldier, angry about being forgotten. She had expected demands for recognition, for money, for revenge. She had not expected this. A man who had saved an empire and wanted nothing in return except a photograph of the children he had protected. "The empire owes you everything," she said quietly. "I owe you everything. My people would be dead without what you did." Minjun shook his head. "Your people owe me nothing. I did what I did because it was right. Because someone had to. Because those children deserved a chance to grow up." He set down the photograph. "That is what humans do, Your Majesty. We protect the ones who cannot protect themselves, even when it costs us everything." Yuna stayed for another hour, asking questions, listening to stories. When she finally left, she did not say goodbye. She said, "I will see you again." Minjun just nodded and returned to his fields. The journey back to the capital took 3 days. Queen Yuna spent most of that time alone in her cabin, thinking about Park Minjun and his simple life on that forgotten moon. She thought about the photograph of the children. She thought about his words. "We protect the ones who cannot protect themselves." Even when it cost us everything. When her ship landed at the palace, Minister Seong-ho was waiting for her. His face was tight with worry. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing stiffly, "the council is very concerned about your absence. There are rumors spreading. Some are saying you have lost your mind." "Let them talk," Yuna replied. "I have more important things to worry about than rumors." She walked past him into the palace, but he followed close behind. "May I ask where you went?" "You may ask, but I'm not ready to answer." "Not yet." That evening, Yuna requested a private meeting with General Taurus. The old soldier arrived at the palace looking confused and nervous. He was nearly 90 now, his body frail and bent, but his mind was still sharp. "Your Majesty," he said, lowering himself slowly into a chair, "it is an honor to be summoned. How may I serve you?" Yuna studied him for a moment. This was the man her people called a hero. The man whose statue stood in every major city. The man whose name was written in golden letters on the memorial of fallen heroes. "I want to talk about the Battle of Crimson Nebula," she said. Taurus went very still. "What about it, Your Majesty?" "I want to know the truth." The silence stretched between them. Yuna could hear the ticking of a clock somewhere in the room. Finally, Taurus let out a long breath, and suddenly he looked much older than his years. "You know then," he said, "it was not a question. I know that you did not discover the location of the Cathari flagship. I know that a human soldier named Park Min-jun sent you the coordinates. I know that without him, we would have lost the war." Taurus closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet with tears. "I have carried this secret for 15 years, he said. "Every time someone called me a hero, every time I received an award or a tribute, I wanted to scream the truth. But I could not. The council forbade it. Why? Because they were afraid." Taurus shook his head slowly. "They were afraid of what it would mean if people knew the truth. That our great empire was saved by a single human. A species we considered primitive and unimportant. The council thought it would make us look weak. That other species would lose respect for us. That our allies would question our leadership. So they buried the truth and made you a false hero." "Yes," Taurus's voice broke. "And I was too much of a coward to refuse. I told myself it was for the good of the empire. I told myself it was for the good of the empire. But the truth is, I was afraid too. Afraid of what would happen if I spoke up. Afraid of being labeled a traitor." Yuna felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced it down. Anger would not help anyone now. Did my mother know? She was the one who made the final decision. She believed it was necessary to protect the empire. Taurus looked at her with pleading eyes. "Please do not blame her too harshly. She did what she thought was right." Yuna stood and walked to the window. The city spread out below her, millions of lives going about their daily business. None of them knew the truth about how their freedom had been won. None of them knew the name Park Min-jun. "What do you want, General?" she asked without turning around. "What do you want me to do with this information?" Taurus was quiet for a moment. "I want you to do what I was too afraid to do. I want you to tell the truth. I want that man to receive the honor he deserves, even if it destroys my reputation in the process. It might do more than destroy your reputation. It might destabilize the empire. Then let it be destabilized." Taurus's voice suddenly grew stronger. "I have lived with this guilt for 15 years. It has eaten away at me every single day. I would rather die a disgrace than continue living as a false hero." Yuna turned back to face him. She saw a broken man, crushed by the weight of a lie he had never wanted to carry. "Thank you, General. You may go." After Taurus left, Yuna went to the Memorial of Fallen Heroes. It was late at night, and the great hall was empty except for a few guards. Torches flickered along the walls. Casting dancing shadows across the names carved in stone and gold dot, she found General Taurus's name near the center of the wall, written in letters larger than any other. Hero of Crimson Nebula. Savior of the Empire. Next to it was an empty space. A space where another name should have been written. Yuna reached out and touched the cold stone. She thought about Minjun, alone on his farm, watching the stars. She thought about the children he had saved, now grown with children of their own. She thought about all the people who owed their lives to a man they had never heard of. The next morning, Minister Seong-ho came to her chambers with his usual pile of documents and schedules. Your Majesty, the Galactic Assembly is meeting next week. As a new ruler, you are expected to give an address. The speechwriters have prepared several options for your approval. Yuna looked at him calmly. I will not be using their speeches. I will be writing my own. Seong-ho frowned. May I ask what you intend to say? I intend to tell the truth. The minister's face went pale. Your Majesty, I must advise against this. The political consequences could be severe. Our allies may question our credibility. Our enemies may see it as weakness. The stability of your reign could be threatened before it has even truly begun. I know the risks. Then why? Why now? The war was 15 years ago. Everyone has moved on. Why disturb the peace for the sake of one human farmer who does not even want recognition? Yuna looked at him steadily. Because my mother built her reign on a lie. Because General Taurus has spent 15 years drowning in guilt. Because somewhere out there is a man who gave everything for my people and received nothing in return. And because I refuse to be a queen who values comfort over justice. Seong-ho stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. Your mother would be proud of you, he said quietly. She often said she wished she had your courage. She made the decision she thought was right at the time. I am making the decision I think is right now. That is all any of us can do. She turned back to her window and looked out at the stars. Prepare my ship, she said. Before I give my speech, there is someone I need to visit one more time. The Galactic Assembly Hall was the largest building in the known galaxy. It had been constructed 3 centuries ago as a place where representatives from every civilized world could come together to discuss matters of peace and war. Thousands of seats rose in great circles around a central platform. Lights floated overhead like captured stars. The air hummed with the voices of 100 different species. Queen Yuna stood in a small room behind the main stage, preparing for the moment that would define her reign. Minister Seong-ho had tried one last time that morning to convince her to change her mind. She had listened politely and then dismissed him. Commander G1 stood by the door, her hand resting on her weapon out of habit. Are you ready, Your Majesty? No, Yuna admitted. But I am going to do it anyway. She walked out onto the platform. The noise of the assembly died away as thousands of beings turned to watch her. She saw Valorians in their finest robes. She saw the insectoid Kralians with their many eyes. She saw the crystalline Ithosi glittering under the lights. And she saw humans scattered throughout the hall, watching her with particular interest. Representatives of the Galactic Assembly, she began, her voice amplified to reach every corner of the vast space. I come before you today not to speak of the future, but to correct the wrong from the past. A murmur ran through the crowd. This was not what they had expected. 15 years ago, my people fought a war against the Cathari. It was a war we were losing. Our fleet was shattered. Our worlds were falling. Surrender seemed like the only option. She paused, letting her words sink in. Then something happened. Something that changed the course of history. The Cathari Queen's flagship was destroyed in a surprise attack. The war ended. My people survived. Another pause. She could see confusion on many faces. This was all known history. Why was she repeating it? For 15 years, we have told a lie about how that victory was achieved. We have given credit to a Valorian general who did not deserve it. We have hidden the truth because we were ashamed of it. Today, I am ending that shame. The murmur grew louder. She saw Valorian nobles shifting uncomfortably in their seats. She saw General Taurus, who had insisted on attending despite his age, watching her with tears streaming down his face. The true hero of the HFY War was not a Valorian. He was a human. A young man named Park Min-jun, who volunteered to fight when most of his species had never even left their home planet. She told him the story. All of it, the desperate volunteer mission. The 9 days alone in enemy space. The transmission that saved an empire. The silence that followed. The deliberate erasure of a hero who deserved to be remembered. My people made a decision based on fear and pride, she said. We could not accept that our survival depended on someone from a species we considered lesser. So we buried the truth. We created a false hero. And we let the real hero disappear into obscurity. She straightened her shoulders and raised her voice. I am here today to say that this was wrong. Park Min-jun saved my people. He saved millions of lives. He flew alone into the heart of enemy territory, knowing he would probably die. And he did it because he wanted to protect innocent people. Children, families, strangers he had never met. The hall was completely silent now. Every eye was fixed on her. Today, I am announcing the creation of a new honor. It will be called the Order of Quiet Courage, and it will recognize those who serve without seeking glory. Those who sacrifice without expecting reward. Those who do what is right, simply because it is right. She reached into her robe and pulled out a small medal. It was shaped like a star, made from the same metal as the crown of stars on her head. The first recipient of this honor is Park Min-jun of the Human Volunteer Unit, not as an apology, though an apology is long overdue, but as an acknowledgement of truth. The truth that my empire exists today because of his courage. The response was immediate. Some Valorian nobles stood up in protest. Some shouted accusations of dishonor and betrayal. But their voices were drowned out by something else. Applause. It started with the humans in the hall. They rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Then the Kralians joined them. Then the Mindari. Then species after species, standing in tribute to a man most of them had never heard of until this moment. Queen Yuna watched as the applause spread through the hall like a wave. She saw tears on human faces. She saw respect on alien faces. She saw General Taurus applauding harder than anyone, his old hand shaking with emotion. Far away, on a small moon called Green Hollow, Park Min-jun was watching the broadcast on a small screen in his farmhouse. He had not planned to watch. He had planned to spend the day working in his fields like any other day. But Commander G1 had visited him the day before. She had told him what the Queen was planning to do. She had asked him to watch. Now he sat alone in his simple home, watching a queen tell his story to the entire galaxy. He heard his name spoken in a hall of thousands. He saw humans he had never met standing in his honor. His eyes fell on the photograph of his sister's children. They were adults now, with families of their own. They had sent him pictures over the years. He had never told them what he had done to save them. He had never wanted them to feel like they owed him anything. But watching the broadcast, something loosened in his chest. Something he had been carrying for 15 years, without even knowing it. The next morning, Min-jun went out to his fields as usual. The suns rose over the hills. The grain swayed in the gentle wind. Everything looked exactly the same as it had the day before. But everything was different. Travelers began stopping at his farm. Not many, just a few each week. They came from all over the galaxy, humans and aliens alike. They did not ask for stories or photographs. They did not treat him like a celebrity. They simply thanked him. Sometimes with words. Sometimes with just a nod and a handshake. Then they left, and Min-jun returned to his work. One evening, a young human woman arrived at his door. She was nervous, twisting her hands together as she spoke. "My grandmother was on one of those refugee ships," she said. "She told me stories about the war when I was little. She always wondered who saved them." Min-jun looked at her. She had her grandmother's eyes, he thought. The same kindness, the same strength. "Your grandmother raised a good family," he said. "That is all the thanks I need." The woman smiled through her tears. She hugged him, a quick, fierce embrace. And then she was gone. Min-jun watched her ship rise into the sky and disappear among the stars. Then he went back inside and made himself tea. On his shelf, next to the photograph of the children, there was now a small medal shaped like a star. It caught the light from his window and glowed softly in the evening air. He did not display it proudly. He did not polish it or show it to visitors. It was just there, like everything else in his life. A simple reminder of a complicated truth, that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never wanted to be heroes at all. They just wanted to do what was right, and that, in the end, was more than enough.